Hey Bullets YouTube channel.
Hurry up, now tell us why you're here.
Team Apple arrived late to qualifying. Uh-oh. And Tex Dynaco looks for another racer to replace Mike Splatloper. I wonder who Tex Dynaco will ask this time. He asked Nick Charger to race for Dynaco. Tex Dynaco! Why? And, as usual, Nick Charger would fail to qualify for this race, which means Tex Dynaco needs to ask someone else. And Tex Dynaco looks for another racer to replace Mike Splatloper. And then he finds Piston Larson to become Dynaco's racer for one race. And Piston Larson will have this new look. Now into the starting grid where Jackson Storm will start at pole position as usual with H.J. Hollis, who's outside. Row 2 has Tim Treadless and Aaron Clocker. I hope Tim Treadless doesn't push anyone. Row 3 has Harvey Rodcap and J.D. McPellar. I wonder how he'll do this race. And row 4 has JD's teammate Chris Roman starting alongside Jonas Carvers, who's outside. Row 5 has Herb Kerbler starting alongside Pitbull Speed Racer to his outside. And row 6 has Cam Spinner and Dan Garcia, both hoping to do well this race. Row 7 has Richie Gunzit, who also has high expectations for this race and flipped over. Row 8 has Barry DePedal. Hopefully he isn't this mad during this race. And Nick Shift, who's outside. Row 9 has Kevin Carvick and Ryan Inside Laney starting on the outside. Row 10 has Bubba Wheelhouse and Eric Breaker. I wonder how they'll do this race. And row 11 has Ed Trunken, who did not do very well during qualifying, and Steve Slick LePage, not so slick. And row 12 has Green Bean Carafine starting on the inside of Jim Reverick. And JP Drive will be the last next generation racer to make it to the race. And who's outside is Bobby Swift, the best performing stock car in qualifying. Starting behind them is Tony Gasworth and defending champion Lightning McQueen. I wonder how they'll do this race. Row 15 has Brick Yardley starting in the same spot as last race and Reb Meekert, who's outside. Row 16 has the Garrison Motorsports teammates Jamarcus K-Kart and James himself on the outside. Row 17 has Ricky Axel and Arthur Carstro to his outside. I wonder how they'll do this race. And row 18 has another Garrison Motorsports racer, Sebastian Silva, starting alongside Darren Leadfoot. Row 19 has Dino Draftsky, who luckily qualifies this race, and Morey Clutchburn, who's outside. Row 20 has Rev Rodages and Piston Larson, who actually comfortably qualifies. Row 21 has Brian Sparks and Ralph Carlo. Both are lucky to qualify for this race, but not as lucky as the racer who qualified 43rd, Paunchy Wipeout, beating Cal Williams and 6 other racers, among many others, to qualify for this race. Now into the race, where Jackson Storm would lead the first 50 laps of the race. Paunchy Wipeout would be out because of an engine failure on lap 29. And then Paunchy Wipeout would say this. Paunchy Wipeout, you want to speak to the officials? It's an engine failure! Don't be like the mean green car in Cars 3 Driven to Win. Kevin Carvick would take the lead on lap 50 and lead the field into lap 51, where Jackson Storm would take the lead and lead for 10 more laps before Kevin Carvick would retake the lead. He would lead for 5 more laps before Ricky Axel would be out on lap 66 because of a transmission issue. Harvey Rodcap would take the lead after the restart and lead for 10 laps before losing the lead to J.D. McPellar, who would lead the field all the way until lap 81, where Tim Treadless would push J.D. McPellar. Why, Tim Treadless? And then Tim Treadless would take the lead and lead all the way until lap 99. Meanwhile, Dino Draftsky would be out on lap 82 because of an engine failure. H.J. Hollis would take the lead on lap 99 and lead for the next 40 laps before Jackson Storm would retake the lead again, leading all the way until lap 157, where Flipped Over would take the lead. He would lead for 2 laps before Lightning McQueen would take the lead on lap 159 and lead the field until lap 160, where Flipped Over would retake the lead for about 20 yards before Dan Garcia would take the lead for himself, losing the lead around turn 1 to H.J. Hollis, who would only lead for 3 yards before Tim Treadless would take the lead from him. he would lose the lead a few yards later to Jackson Storm, who would lead all the way until turn 2, where Pitbull Speed Racer would take the lead. He wouldn't lead for very long because Dan Garcia would be back in the lead. He would lead for a few yards before Barry DePedal would take the lead for himself and lead for about 20 yards before Tim Treadless would shove Barry DePedal into the wall and then take the lead for himself. And then, about 10 yards later, Chris Roman would take the lead for himself, leading for about 15 more yards before Jackson Storm would take the lead again, leading the field until around turn 3, where Jonas Carvers would take the lead for himself. He would only lead for a single yard before Flipped Over would take the lead for himself and lead the field until around turn 4, where Nick Shift would take the lead. He would lead for about 25 yards before Steve Slick LePage would show up and take the lead. Not so slickly, he would lose the lead to Jackson Storm. But due to some slick moves, Steve Slick LePage would retake the lead. But not so slickly, he would lose the lead to Harvey Rodcap. And shortly before the start-finish line, Kevin Carvick would take the lead. And then, a yard after that, Flipped Over would take the lead again. How many lead changes are there going to be this lap? And then Bubba Wheelhouse would take the lead very soon after that. And right before lap 161, Lightning McQueen would retake the lead, leading the field into lap 161. On lap 160, there were a total of 22 lead changes? How does any lap have 22 lead changes? And all of this just to put Lightning McQueen back in the lead. And then Jackson Storm would take the lead for himself on lap 161 and lead the field until lap 164, where JP Drive would take the lead for himself, leading for 5 laps before, you guessed it, Jackson Storm would retake the lead, leading all the way until lap 174, where Tim Treadless would pass him on the outside and lead the field until lap 175. Roughly halfway through that lap, Jackson Storm would retake the lead, leading all the way until lap 177, where H.J. Hollis would take the lead off of pit cycles. After the pit stops are done, Aaron Clocker would take the lead, leading all the way until lap 178, where Kevin Carvick would retake the lead. He would lead until lap 181, where, somehow, Jim Reverick would take the lead, leading the field until lap 182. Shortly after the start-finish line, JP Drive would take the lead once again, leading for 8 more laps before H.J. Hollis would take the lead for himself once again, leading until lap 192, where Ed Trunken would take the lead. He would lead for 6 laps before losing the lead to JP Drive, who would lead all the way until lap 202, where, you guessed it, Jackson Storm would retake the lead, leading for 3 more laps before Herb Kerbler would take the lead, leading all the way until lap 209, where Bubba Wheelhouse would take the lead for himself. He would only lead for about 20 yards before Jackson Storm would take the lead yet again, leading the field until lap 214, where Steve Slick LePage, with some slick moves, would take the lead. But then Tim Treadless would push Steve Slick LePage on lap 215. Then he would take the lead for himself on lap 215, leading for the next 9 laps. And then Tim Treadless would say, "You're not so slick now!" to Steve Slick LePage. Jackson Storm would retake the lead on lap 224, leading all the way until lap 273, where Ed Trunken would take the lead once again, leading for 3 more laps before JP Drive would take the lead for himself on lap 276. But you guessed it, on lap 283, Jackson Storm would retake the lead, leading all the way until lap 321, where Nick Shift would take the lead. He would lead for 5 laps before Jackson Storm would retake the lead again, leading all the way until lap 344, where JP Drive would take the lead once again, leading for 4 more laps before Aaron Clocker would retake the lead. He would lead for 3 more laps. But Tim Treadless would take the lead on lap 351 and lead for 6 more laps before Jackson Storm would lead the final 43 laps of the race. Meanwhile, on lap 397, oh no! Flipped Over ran out of fuel! And for the 13th time this season and in a row, Jackson Storm will win a race, winning the 2016 Fay 400. Kevin Carvick will finish second this race, followed by JP Drive in 3rd, Nick Shift 4th, Ed Trunkin 5th, Tim Treadless 6th, Aaron Clocker 7th, Barry DePedal 8th, Herb Kerbler 9th, and Pitbull Speed Racer rounding out the top 10. Murray Clutchburn was the last car to finish on the lead lap, finishing 40th this race. I already mentioned the top 10, but Steve Slick LePage, not so slick now because he missed out on the top 10. Although he did have some slick moves during the race. Finishing behind Steve Slick LePage is Ryan Inside Laney, finishing the race on the outside. H.J. Hollis will finish 13th, Dan Garcia 14th, and rounding out the top 15, Cam Spinner. Green Bean Car Fiend would finish 16th, followed by Jim Reverick, Flip Dover, Harvey Rodcap, and Chris Roman to round out the top 20. I wonder what happened to him this race. Bubba Wheelhouse will finish 21st, getting 100 points. Jonas Carver's 22nd, and what happened to JD McPillar, finishing in 23rd. Richie Gunzit and Eric Breaker will round out the top 25. Ralph Carlo is the best performing stock car, finishing 26th. Tony Gasworth, Rep Meeker, Brian Sparks, and Darren Leadfoot will round out the top 30. Bobby Swift and Lightning McQueen, what happened to you guys? You're not even finishing in the top 30. Somehow, James Garrison and Jamarcus Kakart also miss out on the top 30. Arthur Carstro will round out the top 35. Sebastian Silva just behind him. Brick Yardley, how did you finish 37th? Speedson Larson finishes 38th. So, Tex Dynaco, this guy was better than Mike Splatloper because he finished ahead of 2 lead lap cars, Rev Rodages and Maury Clutchburn. And I feel bad for Dino Draftsky, Ricky Axel, and Paunchy Wipeout, who couldn't finish the race. And here is the top 20 in points, where Tim Treadless is actually getting close to Lightning McQueen in points. Is Lightning McQueen going to bottle the lead? Flipped over, Cal Weathers and Bobby Swift round out the top 5, with Brick Yardley in 6th, Harvey Rodcap 7th, Ed Trunkin 8th, Aaron Clocker and JD McPillar rounding out the top 10. Ryan Inside Laney is in 11th, followed by Dan Garcia, Reb Meeker, somehow, and Kevin Carvick in 14th. Rounding out the top 15 is one of the Piston Cup's favorite owners, James Garrison, with Ricky Axel just behind him in 16th. Followed by James Racer, Chris Roman in 17th, JP Drive in 18th, Jonas Carver's in 19th, and the biggest news of all, Jackson Storm has made it to the top 20, knocking Maury Clutchburn out of the top 20, and is now 53 points ahead of him. Lightning McQueen, hurry up and get back into form. Jackson Storm is catching up.
Remember to press the notifications button, which goes ring, ring, ring after you press it. And lightning strikes back, and that's as if you subscribed, of course. And thank you for watching this entire video.
I have kept my promise. I have posted within 2 weeks. But video uploads will slow down over the next little while because my schedule is busy and the advent calendar is coming up. I know it's only October, but all of you already know, if you're longtime fans of the channel, that every day from December 1st to 25th, there is a YouTube video being posted. Although, I do not know if I will have time during December to work on the videos. So, uploads may be a little slower compared to usual because I will be working on the Advent Calendar videos. The 30th race of the 2016 Piston Cup season will be coming out soon enough. And if you have a suggestion for what video you want me to make during the Advent Calendar, please comment it down below. But remember that unfortunately, the 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine is still going on over 3 years later. I have received comments over the last few videos that the war is over or that it doesn't matter anymore. The war is still going on, and there's still many people suffering. And there are also many news articles that come out every day about what's happening in Ukraine. So, if you want to comment that the war is over, think about what I just said now. The tyrant Vladimir Putin has taken around 1/5 of Ukraine's land, including Crimea, the Donbass, and parts of the Kherson, Zaporizhia, and Kharkiv oblasts, and it's slowly becoming more, because every day it gets harder for Ukraine to win the war due to declining supplies. We here at the KA Bullets Piston Cup YouTube channel stand with Ukraine in their struggle against Vladimir Putin's tyranny and recognize Ukraine's true borders as shown by this map. Slava Ukrainie! Heroyam slava! Nechai Shvetsya daruється, Ukrainie перемога! Glory to Ukraine! Glory to the heroes! May Ukraine's victory be granted very soon. And territorial integrity maintained.